We begin today the Gemara on Daf Samach Beis Amud Beis, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Yomid. Ve'omar Rabba. So the Gemara here is discussing different things that are written in a document of a sale of a piece of land that will indicate exactly what it is that he's selling him. Ve'omar Rabba, so Rabba said another halacha about this. Meitzer, if he writes that the border of the property that he's selling, Ara Demina Pliga. It's from this property itself that I'm selling you, it's being divided. That's the border. So what does that mean if he says that he's dividing this property? That's the border. That means palga. That means that he's dividing it. And half when samach beis amud beis. You got it? Samach beis amud beis. Towards the end of the Yamud. So that means that the palga, that is, that he gets half of the property. That's where the border is. However, if he writes a different lashon, that's meitzer, that the border of the property that I'm selling you is ara de minop psike. It's from this property that is going to be cut off for you. So he doesn't use the term of pliga or palga. He uses the term psike. Psike means something else. Only tes kaven. That means that the buyer only gets a little piece of land which can produce 9 kav of grain. This amount of tes kabin is based on what the Gemara says earlier in the Masechta, that the minimum size of a property that people usually plant is 9 kavin. If you have shutfim and they want to divide, and one wants to force his partner to divide, it has to be at least a field that you can produce 9 kavin. So when you use the term pliga means that we're splitting this property and the border is going to be right in the middle. I get half and you get half. But if he uses the term psike means I'm cutting you off a shtikela. I'm cutting you a piece. And therefore that piece is the minimum, which is 9 kav, an area that can produce 9 kav. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye says to Rabba about this distinction of these two expressions, Ma'ishna hachi or Ma'ishna hachi. Why is there a difference between these two languages? It's not enough of a reason to make a distinction. We should either say that in both cases he only gets 9 kav, or in both cases he gets half. So Ishtik, Rabba was quiet, Rabba didn't say anything. Now the Gemara says, Savar Mino. The students that were there that heard this, they thought to explain what was Abaye's own opinion, that Abaye himself held idi palge, that in both cases you're getting half, the border is going to be half of the property. That's what the buyer is getting. Whether you write pliga, whether you write psike, either way you're getting half of the property. That's what they thought Abaye's opinion was. But the Gemara says v'loihi, but that's not the case. What is Abaye's opinion about this? Because the Omer of Yemer Bashalmiya, to me, it was explained from Abaye himself. Bein meitzer ara demina palga. Whether he uses this expression that the border is from this property that we're dividing, ubein, or whether he uses the other expression meitzer ara demina psike, that the border is from this property that I'm cutting off for you a piece. In both cases, the halacha is going to be as follows. If the seller is going to say to him or write to him, he's going to add the following line. Ilain matzranoha. These are the borders. So adding these words, ilain matzranoha, it's extra words. Why did he add those words? Palga. That means he's adding those words. These are the borders because he wants to give more. That's an indication that he's selling more here. So then he gets half. If he didn't say these added words, then I say Tisha Kabin, that whether he used the term palga, whether he used the term psike, he's only giving him the minimum amount, which is what could produce 9 kabin of grain. So here we see this concept that when you add a certain language into the shtar, or what you say when you sell, even though these words ilam matzrana doesn't indicate clearly that he means to give him half, but it's added words that weren't necessary. He wrote already all the borders, and then after he writes all the borders, he adds ilam matzrana. These are the borders that within it belongs to you. Why is he adding that? It must be that he's coming to clarify that he wants to give more, that he wants to give him half, not just a piece. Zakta Gemara Pshite, the following halacha is simple. That Omar, a person when he sells, he says, Yachloik Ploini b'nechasai. So and so should get a yachlik. You should divide with my properties. So what is it? What does this term of yachlik mean? Palga. The word yachlik means he gets half. Now the question though is, if he says Tnu chelek leploini b'nechasai, give a chelek to so and so of my possessions. So the question is, what does Tnu chelek mean? Does Tnu Chelek mean also give him half? Just like Yachlik means half, Tnu Chelek means half. Or maybe no, Tnu Chelek means give him a portion, which means you can give him even a tiny portion, much less than that. Ravina Bar Kesi said, Toshama. I'll bring you a raya from the following brayse. The Tanya, we learned in a brayse. A person says, Tnu chelek leploini beber. Give so-and-so a chelek. So using the same lashon, Tnu chelek. Give him a portion of the water that there is in this pit. So how much do you give? So Sumcha says, Ein pachas mirivia. You don't give him less than a quarter. What is this based on? So over here, there's a suffix. What this person meant to say when he said, give him a portion of the water in my pit. Did he mean to say, give him half of the water that's in the pit? Or maybe he meant to say, give him a tiny drop, which would mean give him a revius of water. That's the smallest amount. Give him a revius of water from this pit. So now Sumchas's opinion all over in Shas is, Mammon hamutel b'safik chelkin. Anytime there's a doubt about money, what you do is you divide it. So over here in this case as well, since we have a suffix, whether the word tnu chelik means give him just a little bit, a revius, or it means give him actually half of the water of the pit. So what do? You divide it. You give him half of that. What's half of that? A quarter of the water that's in the pit. And you actually have to give him a quarter with a little bit more, because it's either a revius or half of the water in the pit. So when you're giving him a quarter, you have to give him a little bit more than a quarter, because it's at least a minimum of a revius. So if you're giving him half of that, it has to be a revius with a little bit more. That's why it uses the lashon that you don't give him less than a revia. That's what this is based on. Sumchas's opinion of Mammon Amutel B'Safik Chelkin. The Rashbam here brings Barichis, the source of where Sumchas says this in the Mishnah of Shoshanaga Chesapara, and it's not clear whether the ubar, the fetus that was dead as well, whether it was killed or not. And over there the halacha is that you divide the payment, you only pay half. And here there's actually a chilish in the Rashbam here in our sugya that he says that we paskin like Sumchas. This is a machlokes between Sumchas and the Rabbana that brought in Shas many times. But Rashbam's opinion is that the halacha is like Sumchas. I believe most Rishonim hold that we do not paskin like Sumchas. We paskin like the opinion of the Rabbanon that say that the halacha is hamoitzi mechavere olav haraya. You don't split. You get, if you want to be moitzi, you're going to have to prove. But over here, this brayso brings the opinion of Sumchas. Now, similar, the brayso says, if a person says, lechavis, give a person water from this pit, what he needs to fill up a barrel. So how much do you have to give him now? So he said, tnu chelek lechavis. So now how much do you need to fill up a barrel? In order to fill up a barrel, you need half of the water in the pit to fill up the barrel. Now, when he said the term tnu chelek, give him a portion of that. Meaning only give him a portion means what? Either it meant, again, just to give him a tiny drop, just to give him a revius that he would put in his barrel, or it means give him half of the amount of water that he needs to fill up his barrel. What's that amount? That would be a quarter of the water in the pit. Because again, to fill up the barrel entirely would be half of the water in the pit. So tnu chelek, if you would say it means half of that, would mean a quarter of the water in the pit. So then how much do you give him? Because it's a suffix what he meant, so we split it in half and we say ein pachas mishminis. You don't give him less than an eighth, so you give him half of the amount because there's a suffix, and you give him a little more than that because the minimum would have been a revius. Similar, the brayso continues, there's also in a case where he says l'kedera, give him tnu chelek, give him a portion for what he needs to fill up his pot to cook with it. So ein pachas miyud beis, you don't give him less than a 12th of the amount of water that there is in the pit, because to fill up the pot, the amount is less. The amount would be a 1/6 of the water that's in the pit. So because of that, you give him half of that because of the suffix that it's not clear what he meant to say. Or, I'm not sure if I said the amount right, it's not the 6, but the point is that you give him half of the amount that he wanted to, that it could be that he meant to give him, because it's a suffix, whether he means to give only a quarter, again, it's a suffix if he meant to give him only a revius, that is, a revius haluk, a tiny drop, or he wants to give him half of the amount that taka has to be in a pot when you cook. And the same thing also, l'tfiach. If he said tnu chelek, give a portion of the water that there is in this pit for what? For a tfiach, which is a cup. That's much less. And he says give a portion. So what did he mean? Did he mean give him what he needs to fill up half of the cup? Or did he mean to give him just a revius, a small amount? Ein pachas mishisha asa. So you divide it, and you give him half of the amount because of the suffix, and you give him a 16th of the water that there is in this pit.
So what's defining chelek? Not the word itself, it's what it's going into.
Yeah, correct. In this case, it's based on what it's going into. That's what he means. Half of that thing that it's going into, whether it's the chavis, whether it's the kedera, or the tfiach. So from this, the Gemara learns out that the same thing will be when you get to the shaila that we asked here, that when a person uses this expression of tnu chelek, it's a suffix what he means, and therefore, according to Sumches, the halacha will be that we divide it. You give him half of half. Tani Rabbanon, and a Braisa we learned another halacha. Ben Levi shemachar sada li Yisrael. A Levi that owns a property, and he sells this in Eretz Yisrael, and he's selling this property to a Yid. And he tells the Yid, Almanas, I'm selling you this property with the condition, Shemai Serishin Shali, that the Mai Serishin that you're going to have to give from your produce will remain mine. The Levi is the one that gets the Mai Serishin. And he says, I'm selling you the property, but the Mai Serishin was mine. So Mai Serishin Shalai, that condition takes effect, and he keeps the Mai Serishin. V'im Omar, if he adds and says that it's not only it should be mine, but Leo Lubanai, it'll be mine, and my children shall also get the Ma'aserishin of this property. So the mace, if the seller, that's the Levi, dies, Yitin Lubanai, you give the Ma'aserishin to his children. V'im Omalai, if the seller says, Kozman shehasada zu b'yotcha, as long as you own this property, that's until when I get the Ma'aserishin. So then the buyer now can go ahead and do the following: mochra, if the buyer sells it to someone else, and then v'chazav alakha, he buys it back. So then ein le'olav klum, the seller, the Levi, won't get any of the ma'aserishin anymore because he already sold it to someone else. Now he bought it back, so he buys it back without that condition that the original seller, the Levi, should get the ma'aserishin. Frag the Gemara, what's the pshat in this brayse? Amai, why are we saying that this condition of the Levi takes effect? There's a klal, you cannot ever sell something that's not existing in the world yet. So here, the Levi is making a condition that the meiser of the produce that's going to grow on this property, I will get. It doesn't exist yet. You didn't plant yet. It's not here. How could you make that condition with something that he's going to retain ownership, or he gets from this buyer the meiser rishon if it's not in the world yet? Answers the Gemara. The pshat here is Kivin the Amalei Almanas. Since the seller uses this expression and says, "I'm selling you the property on condition that I get the ma'aserishin, shema'aserishin shali," that he gets the ma'aserishin. What he really means to say by this condition is shiyure shaire lamoke ma'aser. He's really leaving over for himself a tenth of the property that belongs to him. What's the ma'aserishin? Ma'aserishin is a tenth of all the produce. So what he's basically saying to the buyer is, I'm selling you this entire property, but only 90%. 10% of the property is still mine, even though he didn't use that expression befedish. He didn't say 10% of the property is mine. All he said is, I want you to give me the ma'aserishin. But when a person sells and he makes a condition, he uses such kind of words, he's not saying this condition for nothing. We interpret and we explain that his kavanah was not for davar shlei b'laylam. His kavanah must have been that he wants to leave a portion of the actual property, which is here, for himself.
So then it's not by Meiser. It doesn't belong to the Yisrael.
Huh?
It doesn't belong to the
And a chanami. Okay, but that's what. Huh? No, it's not. No, that's okay. And chanami, but that's what it means that that this ma'aserishin you're going to have to give to me because I really own 10% of this property. Yeah. Okay, I hear what you're saying. It's a good question. Okay. Amar Reish Lakish says, based on this halacha, that it says here in this brayse, Zoyse Meres, this tells us another thing. We can learn out from here, if you sell a house to your friend, and the seller says, Almanas, that it's being sold to you with the condition, that the top of the house, meaning the rooftop of the house, the rooftop in those times, they would put up, they needed the space, they used the rooftop separately, they had a fence around it, so that the roof of the house should still be mine. So what's the halacha? So because he says that, he gets an extra usage of this rooftop of the house. Now, the Gemara will explain here what this means. Okay, so the Gemara asks on Amud Beis, Lamai Hilchasa. What exactly is this chiddush that Reish Lakish is saying that because of this condition he gets the usage of the rooftop? So, as Rashbam explains, the question over here of the Gemara is the Mishnah in the beginning of the Perek here says that when you sell a house, that the rooftop is not included in the sale. The gag is a separate usage and it's not included in the sale. So now the fact that he adds this condition and says that the yutel yena, that the rooftop should be mine, why is he adding that condition? Anyways, anytime you sell a house, stam, Without this condition, you don't get the usage of the rooftop. Now Reish Lakish is saying that because he explicitly added this condition, so now you can keep the usage of the Yutel Yaina from the rooftop. What more is there about the usage of the rooftop that he keeps that we wouldn't know automatically without him adding this condition?
How can you define house without a roof?
So
Buying a house, no roof.
We're talking about the usage of the surface of the roof. In those times, the roof was used separately for storage, or for other things. The roof is correct. It's a separate thing.
Yeah.
So the Gemara explains that Rav Zvid says that over here, because he explicitly added this condition, so then he gets an additional usage more than what we would understand from the Mishnah. He also gets the right not only to use the rooftop for himself, but if he wants to stick out a ledge, he's selling the house and the chutzah around for one person. But now he wants to use his rooftop, not just to use the rooftop itself, but he also wants to stick out ledges and beams that are and extend over into the property of the buyer. Because he added this condition, it's understood that he means to add something. Why is he adding this condition if even without the condition itself understood that he could use the rooftop? Muzayin, that he's adding this condition to give him additional rights. He's leaving over even more for himself, that he's able to be Maitzi Zizin, he's able to have these ledges sticking out to have use in that way. Okay, so this Reish Lakish learned from what it says here in the Braisa, that when you add a condition, even though that condition was not clear exactly what you meant, but because you're adding something in the words of the condition of the sale, it must be that you meant to be Meshayir, you meant to add something more for yourself in the usage of this. And the same thing applies here to this Yutel Yena, this rooftop. Rav Papa said, what he's adding over here is Shimratza Livnois Aliyah Al Gaba Baina, that in a case where this the roof collapses, and now the one that sold, that had the rights of the rooftop, wants to rebuild it, he's going to be allowed to rebuild. What this means is that when a person sells a house and the roof is still his, as I'm selling a house, the usage of the rooftop still belongs to the seller. But that's only that roof that was there when you sold the house. Once the house collapses, it says later here in the Pedic, once it collapses and now it's going to be rebuilt, it doesn't belong anymore to the Balagag, the seller, right? It's going to, whoever owns the house is going to rebuild it and it's going to belong to him. It's only the original roof that's there that belongs to him. But now that he added an explicit condition and said that the Yutel Yain is Shali, so then he's adding, even if it's going to collapse and it's going to be rebuilt, it still will be mine. That's what Rav Papa is saying here. Yes, now the Rashbami points out that you have in other places in Gemara, we learned in the end of Bava Basra, where the Gemara talks about two people that own a house. One owns the bottom floor, the other one owns the top floor, or owns the roof. And if the house collapses, then they both actually rebuild it together. And we don't say that only the one living on the downstairs that owns the house is the one that rebuilds the whole thing for himself. There it's talking about a case where they both own it together, like brothers that were Yiddish the house together. But in the case of a seller and a buyer, the seller, once the house collapses, he does not get the right to rebuild that roof to keep it for himself. He sold the house. It's only the original roof that was there in the structure the way it was when he sold it that he has rights for it. But once it collapses, he doesn't. So here though, if he adds that the Yutel Yen is Shali, he's adding that even if it collapses, he could rebuild it. So the Gemara asks on this, Bishloim Rav Zvid, according to Rav Zvid, it's understood, Haine Diktani Zaise Meres. This is why Reish Lakish here said specifically, based on what it said in the Braisa, this concept that when you add an added condition in a sale, and it's not clear what that added condition was, but we could learn out from it that you meant to keep something more for yourself. It's understood, according to Rav Zvid, why Reish Lakish was learning this from this Braisa. Because Reish Lakish was saying, just like the Braisa says, this Levi that's selling the property, and he used this expression saying a t'nai, that I want to keep the ma'aser for myself. That means that he wants to keep a percent of the property for himself. The same thing we say over here regarding the house, that he wants to keep more usage of this rooftop for himself. Not just the actual rooftop, but even the zizim as well. So that's understood why we're comparing it and learning it from this Braisa. However, according to Rav Papa, my zaysei meres. What is the lashon that Reish Lakish is saying, specifically learning out from this Braisa, that from here we see that he gets this additional right? The Rashbam explains, the Gemara's question is, that you see already from other Befedish and Mishnayos later here in this Pedic, that when a person adds a condition like this and says, Zaysei Meres, that Yutel Yain Shali, you don't need a Psaraya from this Braisa, it's clear. He's saying very clearly, Yutel Yain Shali, the rooftop is mine. It's obvious, it's understood that what he's saying is that the rooftop is always going to be his, even if it collapses. He's not giving himself more rights, more kinds of usages that he wouldn't have otherwise. According to Rav Zvid, he's giving himself more space. He can stick out ledges, he can use it more. So that's learned out from the Braisa, that you say that Shiyura Shaira, that there's more that you leave over for yourself. But over here, the fact that you can rebuild this rooftop, why do you have to say Zayseh Meres to learn it out from this Braisa? Kashya, that remains a question on Rav Papa's Pshat here. Talk to Gemara, Amar Rav Dimi min Nerdo. Rav Dimi from Nerdo said the following halacha: Hayman de masbil lebeisel chavre, a person that sells a house to his friend. Avagav the kosavle. Even if when he sold the house, he clearly wrote that he's selling him veruma, the depths of the house, and veruma, and the heights of the house as well. What does that include? So if there's a pit over there, a boir, a dus, a pit, a cistern where you store water in it, is that included in this? When you write that you're selling him the depths as well? So it's not included. He has to additionally write that that you're selling him from the Tahaim, from the abyss, all the way up to the sky. Only if you add that, then you're going to say that it includes other things as well. It includes the pits as well. My time, what's the reason? Why do you have to add and write that? You already wrote that you're selling him the depths and the height. Why do you have to add? If you want other things to be included, what we're talking about over here is that a pit of water should be included. Why do you have to add this lashon? My time, the bistame loy kani. Because when you write veruma, so ibistam, when you write this, it's not going to be kaina. Again, the veruma bistama, that is, again, the veruma, if you don't write it explicitly, but when you sell a house without writing in the document that you're selling veruma, bistama loikani. If you're just selling the house, the veruma will not belong to the buyer. Meaning, when you sell a house and you don't add these words veruma, the depths and the height, that means if the person, the buyer of the house now wants to dig in the ground under the house, he's not allowed to dig there. The earth below under his house is not sold to him. Or Ruma, if he wants to go and build another story on top of his house, it's above the house, it's also not sold to him. So therefore, ahani veruma, when you add those words veruma, what is it add? What is it including in the sale? Lemikni veruma. You're adding it in order to give him the rights to be able to dig below the house or to be able to build above the house, to add the construction above the house. So that's why when you add veruma, it's not going to include other things. It's not going to include a pit where you store water or other things, because you need the veruma to give him the rights to dig under the house or to make a construction above the house. So then, when you add that you're also selling from all the way down to the Tahaim until Reim Rekia, Lemikni Bar Vedus and Mechilos, to also have in the sale, it should be included a Bar Dus, which is where you store water, or Mechilos, or caves, that you can store other things there. So you must explicitly add this Lashon as well to include those things. That was the halacha of Rav Dimi. Says the Gemara, shall we say that we have a clear raya to what Rav Dimi said? Because the Mishnah later here says, regarding the next Mishnah on the next daf, when a person sells a house, says the Mishnah, that the boyer, the pit, or the dos are not included in the sale. Even if he writes the depths and the height, it does not include the boyer v'dos. Says the Gemara, if you're going to say bistame kani veruma, that when a person sells the house and just says a house, stam, and does not add veruma, that it includes the depths and the height, that includes the earth below and construction above that's already yours. So not lahani veruma lemikni bar v'dos mechilas. So if you add that expression of veruma, it should be something additional. This additional language should say that you are now acquiring even the rights that you own the bar and dos mechilas as well. So Elamai, so you see from here that, like Rav Dimi explained, that when you sell a house, it doesn't include the rights of digging in the earth below or construction above. So therefore, veruma is giving you rights for that, and it does not give you the rights for the boyer and the dos.
It's basically a Beferish Mishnah.
Yeah, pretty much a Beferish Mishnah, like what Rav Dimi said. But the Gemara says, no, not necessarily is that the pshat of the Mishnah. The Bachir adds into the Gemara, the halach of the Mishnah actually over there is the loikas of lei. That it's saying that he does not acquire the boyer and the dos because he did not write him clearly the words of veruma, that he's selling him also the heights and the depth. Fragt the Gemara, how could you say that? The Mishnah clearly says that he wrote him. Even if he writes him, he's selling him kiverume. Nevertheless, he's not going to acquire the bayr and the dus. And says the Gemara, Hachi Ka'amar, this is how you have to understand the Mishnah. That even when you sell a house, stam, and you don't write explicitly in the document that is the kiverume that you're selling, the heights and the depth, kimi shekosav dami. It's as if it was written. It's as if you wrote that. And therefore, it's kimi shekosav dami, and therefore lemikne kiverume lemikne bar v'dus mechilas. When you write keverume, it's in order to acquire the bar and dus and mechilas, and therefore you ikasavle. If he's going to write it explicitly, keverume, so kani, he will acquire the bayr and the dus as well. V'ilay kasavle kani, and if he's not going to write it, he won't acquire. In other words, the Gemara is saying that you could learn pshat in the Mishnah when it uses in the Mishnah the lashon afal pisha kasavle keverume. It doesn't mean that he actually explicitly wrote keverume. What it means to say is when you sell a house without writing keverume, just writing a bias stam, it's as if you wrote the words keverume. It's included. If you sell a person a house, what does he understand? I can't dig below if I want to add another, I want to make a basement. I can't do that. I'm selling you a house. I can't do construction and add another floor on top of my house. It's self-understood. It's like mamash, like you wrote it into the shtar even without writing it. That's what the Mishnah meant by the lashon afal pisha kosav, that it's self-understood. Then from this we would understand that if you actually write it, so what are you actually adding by writing keverume if it's self-understood that he has the rights to dig a basement or to make construction higher up? It must be that he wants to add that he'll acquire also a boir and a dus, a pit of water as well. So therefore you could say that the pshat of the Mishnah is not like what Rav Dimi said. Rav Dimi held that when you sell a house, it does not include the rights to dig for a basement or to do construction higher up. And therefore you have to write keverume if you want to get the rights for that. And then you'll have to add another lashon, me'ara tohaime, in order to get the rights to get the bayr and the dus as well. Okay, let's see one more shtickle over here. So the Gemara says on this, Toshima, bring you an araya from the Mishnah of the beginning of the Perek. So it says, when you sell a house, stam, without specifying, what's the halacha? V'lo yesagag. So the rooftop is not included in the sale. And when is that? That's if the rooftop is a place that has a designated use for itself because it has a fence around it that's 10 tefachim high. So that's not included. Says the Gemara, if you're going to say, like we just wanted to explain this next Mishnah here, then you'll say the same thing over here, that when you sell a house without specifying what's included, it's self-understood. The stam house includes also the rights to dig a basement below and the rights to do construction above. So if that's the case, so that even without specifying, it's self-understood that the depths of digging below and the heights of doing construction above is included. So kigavoya asarat tvachim may have it. So over here, if the rooftop has a space where there's a fence around it, and here the Mishnah is saying that it's not included. Why is it not included? If we're following the reasoning here that anytime you sell a house, it's self-understood that it includes below and it includes above as well, so that it should include the rooftop, whether there's a fence there, whether there's no fence there. Why does that make a difference? Elamai, so the Gemara wants to prove from here that you see, like what Rav Dimi said, when you sell a house, digging a basement below is not included, and any construction above is not included either. You have to specify that separately. And if you want to have rights in this acquisition to the bayr and dus as well, you're going to have to add another lashon, ara tohaime. That's what it seems from the Mishnah at the beginning of the Perek here. But the Gemara answers, it's not a raya, because kivin, the Gevoya, asara tfachim, choshev. That over here, even if we're going to say that usually when you sell a house, you get the rights to dig a basement. And you also get the rights to use the rooftop or to add construction on top of your house. That's usually, but not when you have a rooftop where you could specifically see that it has a separate usage because you built a fence there and it's used separately. That gives it a separate significance. It's only that case that will be excluded. Otherwise, we go back to the rule, maybe not like what Avdimi said, that any house that's sold will include the depths and the height even without specifying it explicitly.
Shaka.